Hello everyone, welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan. Today we're going to talk about a new playable modded race and, well, just in general a lot of new factions. It's something that we've seen in a mod before because this is in fact the GNOBLAR HORDES, the unwashed masses, but it was recently updated to be not just a faction on custom battles only but also campaign. So rather than an extension to the Ogre Kingdoms, now you are playing a GNOBLAR faction. And it's quite interesting, it's got its own stuff. It's definitely a bit of a harder campaign if you're looking for a little bit of punishment, but as you progress you actually will get stronger and stronger. So let's go talk about it because there's a lot to actually talk about it. We've got 3 different playable factions and just a whole roster. Yeah, there's a lot. So for the first character, we have Great King Lord Beezer. You start at the Scrap Towers, and this is going to be quite an interesting campaign because you're very close to Greasus, but he's a potential ally, but you're already fighting against the Skaven of that area, which should be easy enough to deal with. Then you've got to deal with, say, for example, Gorst, you've got Kogath. Those are your 2 big enemies, I must say, and it can be a bit tough to deal with depending on how your playstyle is. But if we start looking towards your faction effects, we've got the following effects. So all regions owned by factions that you have a trade agreement with are visible to you. This is going to be quite helpful. Then you've got diplomatic relations plus 20 with Ogre Kingdoms. So there's quite a few Ogre areas. Keep in mind that you're on the southern tip of the Mountains of Morn. So yeah, it actually does help. Character experience gain plus 20% for all characters. This means that your armies are going to level up relatively quickly. And hero capacity plus 2 for wood bellies, which, yeah, I think helps out quite a bit. You can get those heroes very early on. It won't actually take a long time for you to get your heroes, and your armies are quick to recruit anyway, so you should be perfectly fine. Then if you look at the character's own unique traits, you have that you can steal experience gained from other lords. That paired up with your faction effects means that you're going to get quite a lot of levels quite quickly. Then income from raiding plus 50% for Lord's army. I haven't really needed to raid a lot when I was testing this out, but hey, it does help. And then income from sacking and looting settlements plus 50% for Lord's army. This is where I saw the most benefit. Like, you can get a lot done from that. Anyways, if we start moving on to your own unique skill line, it's going to focus around a few different things. So you're going to get a few different buffs to yourself and to the area, boosting up the capabilities of your lucky gits, for example, getting some abilities here and there for damage reduction, or hell, even an explosion to reduce the leadership for your enemies. There's quite a lot here, and you will also increase the Lord and Hero recruitment rank for faction-wide, which I think is very, very useful. Like, out of the 3, I think this is my favorite faction. I've played with a few of them, but definitely the Great King himself just has a lot more benefits. He's not too bad, honestly, he's not too bad. Like, keep in mind, when you start seeing all these stats and that, you're not going to get really big stats. Some of them will be fairly strong, and you do have some items. We'll talk about that in a little bit, or it should be showing on screen right now for at least this one. But, yeah, you don't expect to be, like, a really powerful faction. You're going to have to swarm your enemy until you start getting, like, the better units. Because, yes, there are some legit good units in this roster. Your second legendary lord, Naldor the Masked, is actually a pretty fun campaign too, because you start so drastically different. You're not starting near the Mountains of Morn, but you're in an area where you're going to be fighting against Azag, you're going to be fighting against a lot of Empire, you're going to be fighting with kids that very early on, the vampires too. So if you want a varied start position, if you want to just have loads of different varied enemies, this is definitely the one for you. Though it might be the hardest one, as you do have to kind of get your bearings as you get started, but I don't think it's going to take too long to be able to do so. Anyways, when we start moving on to your faction effects, you have the following benefits. So, hero action cost minus 50% and receive plus 100% experience. This is going to be quite good if you want your heroes to level up quickly and then put them into armies. You've got access to the underway stance for all characters, so you can move around. I really like this for just, being able to move around the mountains quite a lot better. Greatly reduced chance of being detected while in ambush stance. Again, very cool. I mean, the character looks cool. It's like a GNOBLAR witch hunter, more or less. And scrap collected from scrap piles plus 15%. Scrap is a thing that you're going to be dealing with here, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. For its own unique trait, we have that he will only stay wounded for 1 turn. So, yeah, it's actually quite quick. If you do lose him by any chance, he'll just come back. He can loot scrap piles. This is something that's quite important to know because only specific things, characters can loot the scrap piles themselves. And ambush success chance plus 25% for Lord's army. So you're going to be quite decent at getting those ambushes out. And you're going to be able to do quite a bit more damage early on, as obviously, as you're aware, the ambushes are generally better to get damage done even with a bad stack of units. So yeah. When it comes to the unique skill line, you've got a few interesting good abilities. So you can actually get regeneration on another unit, which I think is going to be quite helpful because you do have access to quite a lot of monsters. Being able to get a scrap pile means that your campaign movement range will also be fully replenished, which is going to be quite helpful if you're trying to get to a place quickly, or if you just want to get a little bit more movement just to attack a enemy city. Honestly, he's got some cool ones, being able to get a Vanguard on a lot of different range units. You'll be able to do quite a lot of damage, upgrade them quite heavily. He's interesting. He's definitely very, very interesting. It depends on what type of playstyle you're looking for. The great thing I've found is that the 3 different legendary lords will add in 3 different types of playstyles in general, so you can just play around and just do whatever you want, and I think that works out fairly well. Keep in mind that you're still playing as GNOBLARs though, so don't expect like a, a steamroll campaign, at least very early on. Later on you will do a decent amount of damage, at least that's how I found it, and again, 1 item and you'll automatically unlock that, so it won't take too long for you to be able to get your gear up and running. And lastly, we have Bragg the Godsman. Yeah, you have a legendary lord that is an ogre, but you're not playing as ogres, and he's quite interesting. He, in the future, will likely have his own mechanics. That's what says in the mod page, but until then, he's playing as one of these boys, and I think his campaign's actually quite fun. So you start off in the northern parts of the World's Edge Mountains, so you're dealing with, well, Grimgor early on and Kodak and stuff. It kind of makes it easier for greasers to kind of expand. This is a great character if you want to do a co-op, as far as I am aware. When it comes to faction effects, you have the following. So recruitment cost plus 50% for all units in all armies. This is going to make things a lot more expensive. Campaign movement range plus 10% for all armies, which is quite good. Global recruitment duration minus 1 turn for the minimum of 1, and global recruitment capacity plus 2. I'm imagining that this is stuff that they've got planned for when he has his own mechanics, because global recruitment and stuff doesn't really come to play too much with this faction, as you'll see in just a few moments, but the character himself is pretty cool anyway. I mean, it looks freaking awesome, just like his miniature, which I think is just a massive plus. Your own special trait is as follows: control plus 1 local province, passive ability, the Godsman comes, and finally causes terror. There's not really too much there. The ability itself is just a hex area, which removes enemy fear, which I guess could be useful if you're running around with a lot of GNOBLARs, and reduces enemy leadership too. Not a big thing, but hey, anything does help, and I think that that just kind of adds in a little bit more. He acts like a support character towards his GNOBLARs, which is kind of nice. Anyways, when you start looking towards your own special unique skill line, you've got quite a few things. You've got some hexes there that can do a lot of damage to the enemies. You've got a really good thing, which is campaign movement range plus 15 after winning a battle, which I really like. I honestly really like, as this means that you can just keep very mobile, and you're going to be dealing with Grimgor a lot, you're going to be dealing with Kolak, so it just helps in general. Plus, you can boost up your units quite effectively, just giving them extra abilities, some extra weapon strength. There's a lot to play around here. I honestly think that the character is quite multi-purpose, and this is going to add in a lot of use to it. It's still the character that I've probably used the least out of the 3, but then again, you know, when you've got the big boy who's just got a throne and stuff, you kind of want the throne, right? Anyways, as you might have expected, you've got access to scrap, and scrap is used for unit upgrades. Some of them are fairly powerful, like for example, plus 25% weapon strength, which might not seem like a lot considering that it's still a GNOBLAR, but it does help out, and you will get scrap naturally or just getting the piles, so it very much depends on how you play, and really just use it, because trust me, if you can boost up your troops, maybe save it for like the later troops if you've got a decent start at the beginning, because the later troops themselves are quite strong, but it does really help and it makes your campaign move a lot better. So that's how I've seen it. At least, really, that's just in general how I felt my campaign should go. And scrap itself is just very easy to get. Also, it's very important to note that right now you do not have a technology tree, though I've noticed that it's not really needed considering the scrap upgrades and all that. It's just something that you should know. Maybe it comes in the future, because they did say that they're going to work on stuff as this progresses. Keep in mind this is likely just a beta form of the mod, but in general it plays quite well. Now you might get a little bit worried when you see the construction tab, but don't worry, it's not like the ogres 100% 100%. In fact, it's probably a better system than the ogres. So at the beginning, you have access to your settlements, and they can only get to rank 3. And that's going to stay like that for the rest of your game. This is because you're going to be able to build up, and these are supposed to be your basic hubs. You can get basic recruitment done here. You can still get an economy going. In fact, a rather large portion of your roster is also available here, some of the heroes too. So you don't have to worry. You can just build up and go as you wish. And I think this works out because it's fine, you know? It's very much like the ogres at this specific point, but don't worry. And since your troops are so cheap, you are able to build up an economy really, really well. So there's nothing to like think, oh god, oh god, oh god, because I've noticed it working out quite decently. I did have an issue though where there are no commandments. I'm not sure if that's a bug or not, but I was able to build up an army. I was able to build up quite a decent sized empire without too much of an issue as I expanded, because money is so easy. You'll be growing really, really, really quick. So don't worry about that. When things get more different, however, is your characters. This is your lords and your legendary lords. They are all hordes. So this is why I'm saying that it's a bit better than the ogres, because whilst you're getting these basic settlements, you've also got moving capitals, and they're treated like proper capitals. You can see here that you've got access to basic military, advanced military, and infrastructure, which will help you get your capitals up and running. This the growth is just insane, especially with certain types of skills that will actually drastically improve it too. So you're getting a lot of stuff moving. It's so much better to manage. It is so much better to manage than the ogres. Just feels so much better. You don't have camps. Well, you have camps, but they're hordes. But it feels a lot better. It's just so fun. If someone like makes a sub mod for the ogres just to do this, because I shit you not, it's just fantastic. It is so good that everything just feels fluid, right? Even though this is a modded faction. So your Scrapper is probably one of your best heroes that you have, seeing as the Scrapper could go and collect scrap piles and already starts off quite strong. You can see that's already mounted, so it's able to do a lot of damage. You've got a decent amount of skills there, which will help you with boosting up heroes' army potential. It's honestly pretty good. It's a support hero. And the thing is that the skills, you actually have to pick one. So you can have multiple Scrappers if you so wish, and I feel like you probably would, considering that they've got high stats like all around. I honestly am a really big fan of these. Woodbellies themselves are a bit more generic. They act as a frontline type of hero. Think about your Empire Captain in a sense, and I think that works out quite well. They can get a few buffs here and there, and you can get them mounted on a throne or pigback. We'll talk about the options for the mounts later. But in general, yeah, they're not too bad. You can get decent stats. The thing is, traits here work out quite well. You can get a bunch of heroes with decent traits, and you can have your armies lasting for a decent amount of time. So I think that balancing that is the most important thing. It's also kind of obvious when you start looking towards, say, for example, the Blood-Nose hero, which is next. And these ones are quite interesting. I quite like these. So they are assassins, essentially. That's the best way to explain it, and it's a bit weird to think about a GNOBLAR assassin, but hey, they exist, and you can get them mounted on saber tusks too, so you can make them a lot more viable, a lot more killy too. Very, very fast. I think it's about 85 speed when they're on the saber tusk, which is generally really, really, really good. So it depends on how you use them, but I like them. I honestly find them very useful. And lastly, you have access to the Bone Chewer, which is your magician, essentially. You've got access to the Lore of the Great Maw and the Lore of Beasts, which, yeah, might not be the best laws, but it gives you some magic, and it's always important to have at least some sort of magical support. I'm a big fan of them. Honestly, it's better to have something than nothing at all. It's a bit weird, though, that a GNOBLAR is following the whole Lore of the Great Maw, but hey, I mean, it's still something, and you got some damaging spells with that, right? Alright, now we only have one Lord option, which is the actual head honcho himself, and, well, these are pretty decent, right? So they're melee focused, but you can get a few different variants in terms of the mount options. So you can get them pigback, you can get them on a throne, on a Rhinox. The Rhinox is probably the best one. And in general, like, they're pretty good at buffing. They are actually pretty good at buffing. It depends on what you want to play, but each of them will have two specific skill lines, which will then allow you to either have one or the other. You can choose what benefits you want. I actually kind of like this system, because it means that one Lord option is going to be able to be moved around in terms of skills to decide, oh no, I want this to be more focused on administration or something like that, you know? I think it's kind of cool. Anyways, when we start looking towards the legendary lords themselves, I mean, they look cool. The models are gorgeous, and we're going to be going over them. We're not going to bother looking at the stats because, you know, it's already been something that we've been looking at, rather than the units, of course. But, yeah, I mean, you can tell there's a lot of work that's been put into these, and obviously you have to take into account that the modders in question have put a lot of work here. The modders themselves, at least listed here, are Lost to Insanity, Mixu, and Calm and Normal Time, all well known throughout the community. The generic Lord option is actually quite good. I mean, he's still not going to be the strongest, but you can boost them up as you go along. I do like the mount options. The peek back thing is just... it's kind of funny. It's a bit weird, but it's something that you can expect from Warhammer, so yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I am a big fan of them. I think that they bring in a little bit of flavor. The faction as a whole is just really fun to play. It's definitely something different. And right now, since we're waiting for DLC, it's always great to play these custom factions because it does allow you to just kind of expand and just try out new things. We start looking towards the heroes. I mean, the Scrapper is absolutely fantastic. The fact that it starts off with this mount and those stats at the very beginning is just freaking great. Like, it can do a lot of damage. Sure, you can have it going around for scrap piles, but you can unlock one and just have, like, one searching for scrap piles, whilst the other one is just doing a lot of damage, because early on you're going to be dealing with Skaven, aren't you? So you want to deal with hordes with a Scrapper because it'll do a lot of damage. Same thing when you're dealing with, say, for example, Ghost or Kogath. All in all, you're going to be dealing with a lot of hordes at the very beginning, so having a Scrapper with you is just going to be absolutely great. Same thing with the Bone Chewers. I mean, all the heroes actually are very, very useful. Having magic at the beginning is going to help you out quite a lot. I mean, it's going to be a while until you can actually get them, depending on how you focus up your building. But the Lore of Beast itself is quite good for dealing with hordes, mostly because of one specific spell. The Lore of the Great Maw too, and it's quite beefy, can do quite a lot of area of effect damage, and that's definitely something that you want to have when you're dealing with hordes. So all in all of them have been pretty good. The Blood Nose itself actually surprised me, because I wasn't too sure about an Assassin GNOBLAR, but once you get it mounted up, it can do damage. It's a great character hunter, and it's something that I feel like should be a part of your main roster, depending on what you play as. But definitely, if you need to take out like a stray wizard, if you need to take out a character, or even, say for example, a war machine, 95 speed is just nothing to sniff at, especially when you're dealing with so many enemies that are going to be quicker than you for your normal stuff. So yeah, the support is just generally really helpful. Honestly, all the heroes I've found some sort of useful. The last one is the Woodbelly, which probably I found the least for, mostly because it's just melee focused. I mean, it's got armor piercing and it's armored. It's pretty good at doing some damage. Then again, these are Gnoblars, so don't expect like high damage outputs all the time. But it's definitely something quite interesting. I've liked them, but not as much as, say, for example, the Scrapper or the Bloody Nose. Alright, well, we're going to start looking at the units now, and the fact is that they're not going to be great. There are some really good ones. We're going to be going section by section, and this is obviously all the basic melee units. The Gnoblars themselves are basic because, well, you know, we've got them in vanilla. We do get some of the vanilla units too, which I think adds in a little bit of help here. So there's not really too much to talk about these. It's a bit of a weird thing. But you see these stats here, and pretty much expect those stats just getting a little bit better as you progress through the tiers. A little bit. Just a little bit. Gnoblar fighters at least will bring in a little bit more anti-infantry damage. It's still not going to be great, but it's still better than nothing. And early on, you know, you're going to be dealing with Skaven slaves, you're going to be dealing with zombies. So these are perfect. These are honestly a perfect unit just to get that going. So, yeah, you're going to want a few of them, at least at the very beginning. Ogre Biters is when things start getting a little bit better, because, yeah, there's basic Gnoblars, but they've got anti-large, which is obviously very, very useful if you decide to start fighting against the ogres. And also they've got access to armor piercing, which is quite surprising because it's a spear unit, but hey, it gives you something that can act as a proper frontline at the very beginning of your campaign, and I find them to be fairly useful, surprisingly. Man-Biters are just another variant. They're up there to do some damage, armor piercing. They're basically another choice of a unit in case you don't want the Ogre Biters. I still think that the Ogre Biters are much better, but hey, it depends on you guys, because you guys have different playstyles to me anyway. Lucky Gits are a pretty good unit because they're frontline. They're able to get a decent amount of damage resistance when they're out of melee, which I think is quite good. This is going to be to deal with anything shooting at you at the very start, which early on, maybe not. Well, if you start with the faction which actually is in the Empire, then you're going to be dealing with a lot of stuff there. So I kind of like them because of that. It just helps a little bit, right? Get your units a little bit safer so they can get in front and try and do some damage. I think that's probably the best way of saying it. Alright, we're moving on to the range section now, and here's where things actually get good. Yeah, I know, it's weird. So, we've got Gnoblar Flingers. They're not the best unit, but they're your early range units. They're basically just Skaven slaves, which probably a little bit better stats, I think, overall. They're not the best, but they will definitely help out very early on. GNOBLAR Trappers, there's not much to talk about, but you've seen them in vanilla, and yeah, they're pretty good. They were actually a good unit in the Ogre roster, and they're a good unit down here too. So I'd suggest using them as you start building up and getting your other really cool stuff out of the way. Powder Sniffers themselves are pretty cool because they do some fire damage, and fire damage is always helpful because you're going to be dealing with Nurgle, you're going to be dealing with, you know, Ghosts, so some undead, you're going to be dealing with some big boys that have a lot of regen, so fire damage is going to be very, very good for that. Plus, it's just nice to have a little bit of variety. They don't have a lot of ammo, and they have to get really up close, but overall, the damage is cool, plus it's flaming attacks and melee too, so you can't really go wrong with that. So this is where you get a new unit, which is actually really, really good. These are called the Rust Buckets. There's 2 variants, and you can see from the stats that they're actually really stacked up. So Gnoblars with heavy armor and also good at melee. You've got 2 variants, the one which is just like the basic front line with sword and board, and the second which is a great weapon variant. They're both themselves hybrids, so you've got range too. And I really, really like these units because they're just able to do quite a lot of damage overall. I honestly, I'm really surprised because they look great. I love the rusted armor, I think it's really, really cool. But they're really good as a high tier unit. They're considered your best, I think, throughout the whole campaign. I mean, you've got big monsters and stuff, but these are definitely something really special. And what you would have noticed is we have another considered high-tier unit. I don't know how to actually classify these because they're the Pigback Riders. You've got 2 variants. You've got a ranged one, and then you've got a standard cavalry version. It's slow cav. It's very slow cav. I don't know. Like, maybe you'll find some use to them. I haven't. I honestly haven't throughout my playing of this mod. I find it really hard to justify. They look funny though, and it's so very Warhammer. I think that's the most important thing, but yeah. I'm going to have access to 3 big units from the original roster, which is the Giant, then the Saber Pack, and obviously also the Gnoblar Scrap Launcher because it fits with a Gnoblar race. They're all good. The Saber Packs actually work better because you do have a hero that can boost them up. I believe that was the Bloody Nose. So it just makes them more viable. It gives you something fast and durable to do some damage with. Giants should in theory be better overall because they recently got boosted up. And, well, then you've got the Scrap Launcher, which gives you some artillery. Which artillery, for any faction, is quite good, depending on who you play. But yeah, with the Gnoblars, having some support because it's still mounted by a Rhinox, you know, it's going to help. There's a few more units, like the Rhinox Riders, which, well, it's not really Riders. Well, yeah, because it's a few Gnoblars and 1 Rhinox. It's a single entity, but it's still pretty decent. Yeah, I would have liked them if they had, like, 2 or 3 Rhinoxes just to add in a little bit of a heavier push. But, yeah, it's not too bad. Then you've got access to Yetis, too. We're going to be going over them, and we're going to be going over the Regiments of Renown also, because there's a fully stacked Regiment of Renown list to give you a little bit more flavor, I guess, for everything, and I think it works out really, really well. In general, this mod is great. It adds in a different playstyle. It adds in just something different, which I feel is kind of needed at the moment. We're a few months post Immortal Empires at this point, what, 2 or 3, and a lot of people are looking for something new. And yes, people want the Chaos Dwarfs, and they will eventually come, but this is the time to start playing with all these modded factions, the ones that are coming in. Some very, very competent modders are creating stuff, which, let's be honest, we're never going to see a Gnoblar race, you know, its own dedicated race, because it would be asking for a bit much, I think, out of, like, everything possible. So I think this is really, really cool. It adds in just something different. If you want a hard campaign, because at the beginning it is kind of hard, it gets a little easier once you start getting access to the Rust Buckets and so on. I wouldn't say it's, like, the hardest campaign, but it's definitely one of those. You definitely need to try out this mod, which will be linked in the description below. Honestly, yeah, you want to try it. You want to do something different. This is going to break away the monotony from doing the same Empire campaign over and over again, I think. And the quality is absolutely there. All the units are great. Hell, it's just so nice to see something so different. Honestly, I'm having a lot of fun with this. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this mod in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. And I'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.